Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. My name is Melanie McQuaid. I'm the Heritage Officer with Westmeath County Council. As you can see, this is Heritage Week and we're delighted to have Robin Feguson here from Repair Act Ireland to give a presentation on the history of repair in Westmeath. Before we hand over to Robin, Al McLavin from the project is going to say a few words about the project itself. Thanks.
Great. So the first thing to say is that this session is going to be recorded, so you all know that. But we'll turn off the camera at the end for the discussion session, so we can all be comfortable to have a chat afterwards. So last year in 2021, I contacted Melanie and I said, would you like to be involved in a project about repair in County Westmeath? And Melanie said, yes, I would. So we put in an application to Creative Ireland with artist and academic Teresa Dillon, and also the Environmental Awareness Officer, John Jackson, and the Public Participation Network, to look at the history of repair in County Westmeath, to look at what kind of repairs are happening in the county at the moment, and also what is the future of repair in the county. So we've been focusing mainly on the repair of objects. So for the last 5 or 6 months, we've been going around the county. We've been holding events in different towns and villages and asking people what they are repairing. People have been bringing objects to these events and talking about repair, talking about the repair skills of the past, talking about perhaps a loss of repair skills, and thinking about how we can repair more in the future. So in this project, we specifically wanted to look at what was repaired in County Westmeath, and we looked at time intervals from 1938 to the present. And this is what Robin is going to be talking about today. And the aim of this really is to look to the past, to see what we can learn from the past, and to see how this can help us think about the future of repair in the county. So this is a pilot project really. We're also creating Ireland's first repair declaration, a set of actions and statements around repair and how we can make repair and fixing more visible and more accessible in our towns and villages. So we hope to continue this project next year and also to work in other counties as well. So it's great that we're starting in County Westmeath. So I'll leave the rest of the session to Robin, who carried out the archival work in the library here and also in Athlone and in other libraries throughout the country. So Robin, over to you.
So yeah, you might actually notice that this picture is looking out the windows here at the library. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to put it down here. So the first thing that I wanted to show you guys is actually the website for the project, and I was going to give all that background that Alma so beautifully just did, so I can just skip right over that. But when you have a chance to go to the website, it's a really interesting thing to do, especially the stories page, because that's the spot where you'll be able to go and submit your stories of repair and see what other folks have done, including myself. There's a couple of stories on there from my family too. So I'll show you that again later. And by the way, as I'm talking through the data that I've collected, obviously I'm American. Alma, let me work on this project despite that. But it was really interesting going through this data and learning a lot more about the country of Ireland and the history through the data itself and what the everyday person's everyday life was like. And so, it would be great if you all want to interact and interject any thoughts you have as I go through the data. Any questions or reflections that it brings up would be wonderful. So the first thing I wanted to do was just kind of talk to you about how we looked at the records and kind of the assumptions that we used and constraints as we searched, because of course there's a ton of data that we could have looked at, and just want to kind of give you an understanding of how we searched so that you can make a bit more sense of our data as we go through it. So the sources that we had here in Ireland, we had national trade directories which is actually the cover slide that I showed you. That's a couple of those. We had newspapers, phone book listings, Google Maps was something we used for current records, and also all of the books, like Ruth is here, looked at some of her books to get that information. What we don't have is what they had in England, right? The insurance maps that had some level of detail that we didn't have here. But as Alma mentioned, we were looking at these target timeframes, and those were set to be coincident with the timeframes that they used in the Repair Act's international project, so that we can compare apples to apples in those different areas. And Alma didn't mention it, but correct me if I'm wrong, but those countries are Brazil and India and England, that they've done this similar work. So that will be really interesting to look at Ireland and those other countries in those same time frames. And then we had keywords to search with, of course, and we were specifically looking at businesses and activities within County Westmeath, so distinguishing from, businesses that were outside the county but that might have served the residents of the county. We did not include those. So I mentioned a few of these here, but a couple of things I wanted to reiterate with this: assumptions and constraints. When we say that we focused on those target years, for example, 1938, what we mean is that when we found a record that occurred anywhere between 1928 to 1948, it's a 20-year interval. So that's important to recognize as we go through the data, because you might catch me on certain things and say, well, we didn't have that in Ireland in 19 whatever. That's going to be the reason why, because those intervals are pretty broad. And for our purposes, while taking something that is broken and fixing it and reusing it is definitely a wonderful thing that contributes to things that we're interested in, we did not consider repurposing as repairing. We considered it as fixing something and using it back to its original purpose. So like taking a wardrobe and repainting it and using it as a totally different thing, that would probably fall within, but you understand what I'm saying. Taking a tire, making a planter out of it, for example, would not. And then as you probably know, if you've looked at the documents that are available, there's all different levels of detail depending on what type of source you're looking at. And I'll talk about that a little more. So the trade directories, for example, list businesses by categories. And so you have to make inferences about, if a business is listed as a hardware store, for example, in which time frame they occur. Did they actually do repairs and sell repair items, or are they just purely a merchant that doesn't sell things, that does not repair things directly? So different levels of detail associated with trade directories and different decisions you have to make versus, for example, the golden pages, where you'd have advertisements for these businesses and they would be much more specific as to what they actually do. So we used the golden pages and had a lot of success with the advertisements located in there, and really understanding, if a business said they did repair on electronics, a lot of times we were lucky enough that they would specifically itemize those things that they repaired. And then newspapers, similarly, the advertisements were very helpful. To search the newspapers, I actually used the online archive of the newspapers here in Ireland, with the exception of the Athlone Observer. I had to use microfiche, but that was very, very helpful to be able to go through and actually search electronically on those words. So it's fascinating. If you ever have an interest in any specific nuance of history here in Ireland, that was a great resource. And the last bullet here, I had to exclude terms like residence, house, and bedroom, because there were a lot of housing advertisements that said, room for rent, in great repair during that. And then I'm going to take the liberty of, I know this is presentation 101 that you don't do, but these are great. These are examples of the local history books that were available in our libraries here. bad archivist, I did not get the reference on this one, so I'll have to look into that more. But what it says is, late at night, there would be a knock on our door, and the next thing you heard was a bicycle in the kitchen, and my father getting a couple of spoons out of the drawer. And you would hear the chat about, nothing's seen up there tonight, and then you would hear, hold it there, get a basin of water, and they were on their way to fixing the puncture. Patches were always in houses that time, and glass paper to rub on the tube. Of course, I was in bed at that time and supposed to be asleep. So of course you're talking about puncture repair on a bicycle. And then this one here from the years between in Moat. There were several excellent butcher shops too, and the Brown brothers, Jack, Tommy, and Patty near St. Patrick's Church were all three possessed of multi-skills. They plumbed, built wheels for bikes, repaired cars and bicycles, radios, and electric irons, as did the late John Price, who worked with them. The Browns sold bicycles too, Raleighs, Rudges, and Hummers. And this is so great. It was a time when anything that was mendable was mended, and the planned obsolescence of today's throwaway society was completely unknown. So, you know, it's kind of like spine-tingling in terms of the goals and objectives of this project and the why we're looking at this, right? But also this is a good example of the level of detail that you have in this is fascinating, and to have this type of conversation is great. Makes it a little hard to capture this data in the same way that you might from a phone book, but you know, this is just gold. And then finally, Google Maps and internet search was kind of the modern day, because we took the data all the way through 2022, which of course we don't have a complete set of newspapers or phone books for. So actually Teresa was who told me to do this, to go into Google Maps and search the word repair once you've navigated to County Westmeath, brought up all the businesses that are mapped with and that have repair somewhere in their description. And that was actually very productive. We got just as many records from that as we did from the other search methods for previous years. Okay, raw data facts. So what did we get from it? We got a total of 1,509 records, including records from the schools collection, the Dugas schools collection. And that would be larger if I had looked at all of the counties, but I focused just on County Westmeath for the schools collection records, which I'll describe some more later. And we got 967, so around 1,000 records from the other sources from 1920 to present, so more within our scope of time frame, because the schools collection is earlier, or could be earlier. I'll explain that in a second. And then to organize the data, we had to put it, you know, intuitively, the most satisfying thing to do would be to look at the list of items, you know, to go through and say, okay, you could fix an umbrella, you could fix an accordion, you could fix a car. We have that, and that's very interesting to flip through, but that's hard to analyze in any meaningful way. So we had to put our data into these categories. So we looked at what type of repair business it is, you know, for example, is it a welding shop versus a bicycle shop? And had to put it into some summary categories to look at it in another way. But what we also did was we assigned a profession to who would be doing the repair that we saw. And that was actually really powerful. And then, again, the specific items list. Findings. So, before I go into the findings, something that Alma said that she has discovered from the workshops and hearing people's stories of repair is that, you know, rarely is a repair successful probably from start to finish right from the get-go. So frustration leads to humor. There's great crack in repair even when it fails. So one of the things that folks have done in these types of projects is have like an open mic night and have people tell their stories about, yeah, here's the one that went well, and here's, what do you hear this one, you know. So I like that. And there's actually some jokes that I found in the records. Oh, I didn't mean to go that far. But anyway, don't look at that one yet. This one is from 1937, and it might not be very visible to you all. So it says, "Hello, never saw you walking so quickly before. Where are you going? A man has just stolen my car, and he's gone down this way with it. But surely you don't expect to overtake him on foot." "Don't I? He's got no repair outfit with him." And I read that to Alma, and she did not laugh either. She said it didn't travel well through time. But this in the blue, and that one, and that one, and that one. I did a quick search and found this website called upjoke.com, in which you can look at categories there, and I put in repair, and these were among the top 30 or 50 repair-related jokes, and I think they're very funny. And you can go and you can actually vote up or down whether you think they're funny or not. I'll skip off of that one. All right, so this is part of the school's collection. Just wanted to capture a few images from it because it's just phenomenal. It's just a wonderful resource. The school's collection is where in the late 1930s, school children went out and across Ireland and interviewed people in their family about their memories. So 1930s, so it would be, their mother, their grandfather, talking about what they recollect from their lives. And it's just a gold mine. They had certain categories that they talked about, traditions, crafts, characteristics of the town. And while none of them were specifically about repair, it's got nuggets of that all throughout. So this is just a picture of, repairing a barrel. There's some discussion of repair in here, of specifically shoemaking and mending. And it's really indicative of, throughout, of how different their lives were, how simple they were in terms of, the access to the items that they had in their lives and their homes. And the fact that they individually would fix them, or maybe somebody in the community, rather than, the way that we live now of purchasing mass production and being farther removed from our things and the ability to repair them. And this quote up top is talking about the fact that shoes were so precious, up until, a person was a little bit older, they wouldn't have shoes to wear on a daily basis, and then they were very well taken care of because they were made locally, and it was not easy to come by. And Alma, as you pointed out, there's things to take from that. Obviously, that's related to deprivation and the way things were then, but there's things to carry forward from that we can incorporate into our existence today and carry forward as far as learned skills and pride in making things. I need to take just a sip of water. So I mentioned, of course, that we have lists of the items with the time frames that they were repaired in. And this is the list from 1938, which of course means it's from actually 1928 through 1948. And I've highlighted a couple things here because it's a bear to just read and make any sense of, but if you kind of look at it overall, you get the sense that these things are very, not abstract. They're approachable. You understand what they are. You can see it. You can imagine that you yourself could even fix these things, possibly. Except for roof thatch, of course. I highlighted that because that's, such an issue with the lack of folks being able to do that anymore. But if you compare that list to then the list for 1958, now you start to see already electric things coming in, household appliances, motors, starters. The list is just becoming more complex and requires more and more specialized skills to be able to repair those items. And then, part of the reason that we focused on County Westmeath is the aspect of agriculture and interest in the Midlands and capturing those nuances. And you see agricultural machinery and industrial machinery coming in now as something that was, advertised services for repair versus back in, again, 1938. In fact, if I can go back.
Use the arrow.
Yep, there we go. 1938, instead of agricultural machinery, you saw spades, plows, And into 1978, we see industrial and domestic refrigeration systems coming in, which I think is interesting. So that to me is related to more mass production, bigger factories, bigger businesses that now you have to have these industrial systems to take care of. And you start to see the complexity in electronics coming in. You got all these different repair services advertised for all these different electronics now. And vehicles. At this point, it's not taking your car down to the local garage and one guy can fix everything. You start to see the specialization coming in. And then, I don't know, something about this, just seeing alarms now, and burglar alarms, fire alarms, car alarms. We went from 1938, your neighbor, he can fix that, and she can fix that, and you can fix that, and everybody's, to now burglar alarms. But listen, I don't want to get too far from the data and start, hypothesizing too much. 98, dentures, yeah. I love that. And again, refrigeration, and I highlighted this again because now we're seeing the agriculture-related specialities building up of, now we've got dairy cabinets, meat cabinets, milk coolers, etc. And even now satellite television systems. So again, it's just the level of complexity is constantly ratcheting up, but we still have dentures. 2018, similar things. And then now in 2022, you see how much already the list of consumer electronics is just already much bigger. And musical instruments, now we have electronic instruments, which I'm sure was true in earlier time frames, but we just maybe didn't see a record of that. An advertisement meaning. So that was the items, but if we look at it in terms of professions, in terms of who's doing the repairs, that's really interesting too. Because here in 1938, I'm not sure the Christmas of this is able for you to read it, but here on the left-hand side we have blacksmiths, because of course before the car really was predominant, you would have blacksmiths would be so important. But already by 1958, it's mechanics over here on the left, and blacksmiths are over here. And things, in the middle are moving around. And we have a really cool animation to show you, and I might fumble with it a little bit, but it illustrates this for you and shows you how these bars move. So give me just a sec. This was created by the graphics team on our project. Oh, come on. Okay. This is easier just on the laptop. So what this is doing is it's going, I'll play it again after I explain it. It's going through time. You see the slider across on the bottom is moving from 1938 over to 2022. And the bars are showing you what percentage of each of these professions do they make up out of all the professions in the findings. So if there was, for example, this is 32 next to mechanics, that means that 32% of the repairs in that time frame were taken on by mechanics versus 17% by builders. This is really interesting to me because you can see it, and you can see if you pick one bar, you can see it going down, 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 or up, 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 up as the timeline goes across. And it does a good job of kind of giving you the feeling that, yeah, it's not in 1978, boom, this was the number. It's a duration, it's a movement across. So I'll play it again, and maybe when I play it, just kind of focus on the top line, maybe the top three. When we start in 1938, of course, the top line is blacksmiths. And so if you watch it, you'll see, just go down, and you'll see the other ones flip around.
So what are the top three in 1938? Blacksmiths?
Blacksmiths, shoemakers, and it was something else, but mechanics has already popped up.
Carpenters.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just probably standing right in front of it too, it doesn't help. But we've tweeted this out actually, right, on Twitter, and I guess it'll be on our website as well. So if you wanted to kind of look at it and watch it slower or anything like that, it is really interesting. And I should make a point too that these numbers here, again, electronics tech 9, that's 9%. That's not 9 electronics technicians. And this is just a snapshot of our data. You know, this is just a snapshot of time, I should say. There's no way that we could know, for example, that, you know, all the plumbing and heating contractors actually advertised in any one time frame. There's a lot of word of mouth work that goes on, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really just an indicator of relative importance of these professions, or across time, predominance of these professions. Right. Yeah, this. And then if we look at it in another different way, this is the percentage of these activities, you know, per year. And this allows you, because it's got each year in a different color, you can see, you know, for example, bicycles, where are you? Bicycle related repair over time. It does change, obviously, but it's not a huge change. It never goes away. Even though car repair would be, yeah, it is right here, spiking here and getting higher, 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 you still have bicycles being important. You still have agricultural implements being important. You still have electrical appliances, electronics, all those things. But you see you can see this much smaller percentage of the findings, but you can see what they do over time. So as we were looking at the data, kind of 4 key areas jumped out at us as being something that we wanted to retain and look at individually. And that was transportation related repair, both from the data and kind of like the importance to everyday life. Agriculture related repair, again, because of the nature of County Westmeath. Clothing and shoe repair, because that's something that you see and kind of is intuitive that we've lost shoemaking, shoe fixing, and clothing repair to the degree that we had it anyway. And then electrical and electronics repair, that emerged from the data, meaning we just saw that, you know, that trend was so important. So when you pull those out specifically, you can see some interesting things, all of which is pretty obvious, but I think this is a nice stark graph of, you know, coaches, boom, cars, but that bicycles stay level, and we also have the boats in here, which I think is something specific to Athlone and these areas is of interest. And I just put these in here as examples of the advertisements that we would have been pulling our data from. I don't have a hard time seeing it, but because of the glare. So if you look at those, you can see there's lots of interesting nuggets to pull out of these. Yeah, and this Athlone Engineering Works art advertisement is just a really good one. Can make spare parts for most types of obsolete machinery, repairs to crane separators. You know, it doesn't get more helpful than that as far as data archives, right? Bring your machinery in as early as possible for repairs. Also spraying machines. don't wait till the day you want to use the machine to find out it's in need of repair. So it's really good stuff. And then here, oh shoot. I figured that one. Yeah. This is again just another way to look at the data. If you separate it out by just those transportation related repair professions, you can really see what happened to blacksmiths, what happened to coach builders. There's still some saddlers and harness makers. There's still some wheel makers up until that point, then they're gone. Bike mechanics are still in there, and then the auto mechanics. But what you don't see in just looking at it this way, of course, is the specialization that has occurred. And then this is clothes makers, and as you expect, you can see that decline. This is here in Mullingar, and what you can't see is there's actually a help wanted sign in the window for seamstress. And there's some advertisements, just as an example again, for shoemaking, and you see that chart there. It's just, you know, as mass production came in, we just don't repair as many shoes as we used to. And this chart is looking at electrical in particular. And so you can see the cumulative increase in electrical related repair as we get more appliances and so forth. But you can see the predominance of electronics technicians and how much they add to that. So that's just an interesting way to look at the data as well. And then a bunch of electronics repair advertisements, and these are really interesting to look at too. Just give you a second there. Because you tend to think that nowadays it's all mobile phones and computers, but it's certainly not. There's all sorts of things being repaired in there. Because all sorts of things now have electronics. And that's another takeaway from the workshops that Alma has been doing, is that even in the agricultural context, there's machinery coming in for repair that now has electronics on it. So it's affecting the agricultural industry as well. And there's just a discussion to show the agricultural change over time. So what this, the reason this is so high is because there were so many blacksmith records in this time frame, and that fell into the agricultural category. So now it's lower, but that's because, it's not that it's an importance thing, it's just because those activities, just depends on how you parse the data. I thought this was interesting as I was going through the data of how many businesses have been around for so long. So I filtered the data actually just this morning and pulled out a couple businesses that have been around over 80 years and some that have been around for 60. And I'm sure we've probably missed some. These are businesses specifically that have some component of repair activity. So, that's heartening, right? So in kind of conclusion, the point of all this is, again, looking to what we repair and reducing waste and trying to take that into the future and learning from what we've done in the past and recognizing, where we might be losing these skills and where we need to supplement them. But what we actually found by looking at the data was, at least to me, it was surprising, because I expected to see not much repair going on, honestly. But what we actually found was the repair is just different. It's a different scope of repair. It's a different breadth of repair. And so we've got kind of 5 key messages from the data. Number one, just about the data, we've got nearly 1,000 records to look at to base this on from County Westmeath from 1938 to 2022. And based on that, the number of repair professions and repair activities has stayed actually pretty stable. But what the data shows is that while building repair and agricultural repairs remain steady, there are certain things that have completely dropped off. Again, blacksmithing, clothing making, and that those have been replaced by the number of mechanics and the electronics repair aspects. And then overall, the thing to note about this data is that if you dive down into it, you see the increased specialization, the increased complexity of our lives. And the facts, that's what makes it so difficult for us to repair things at home. Well, one of the many things. And I just wanted to return to this. This is our stories page off of the website. And if you were to click on stories, you could submit your story. There's a nice little form that you just put in some details about something that you have repaired at your home and upload a picture, and you can be part of the collection of the current stories of repair going forward.